my experience of the show was that it kept moving past me. I kept going from floor to floor to see different things. And the more I went up and down, the more I would go from one place to the other, the more things seemed to speed up. So that instead of looking at one painting, I found myself looking at 3 or 4 at the same time, or one piece of sculpture. And you know, during the process of doing the looking, she had dancers and performers presenting work. I don't know if she choreographed it or she gave them permission to use their own ideas, but there were performers there who were also, you know, giving you the aspect of motion and change in the show. So the experience I had was that she kept changing what was going on. So no matter where you went, it was very hard to settle in. Part of the idea that came through, and certainly was part of Caroline's thinking, was that the show was an invitation to literally pick her mind, to come in to the reason she created the work, to get into her brain, if you will, and to be able to pick and choose among those elements that would lead you to see why she did what she did. Saying that, though, what I would want to go back to is that the work didn't stop and start. It kept going from one element to another. And part of the reason for that was the site that she picked for it, which was this former synagogue that had been built, I guess, way back in the day when the Russian Jews were coming into the Lower East Side. And it was a very elaborate structure. And it was also a structure that that didn't read easily. It had a lot of nooks and crannies. It wasn't easy to make your way or see what was going on. And that reminded me of what she said about getting into her brain. Because one of the aspects of picking somebody's brain or getting in to see it is that everything isn't clearly laid out. It's not a road map. There's a wonderful book called Your Inner Fish that's basically about the neurosystem of human beings and how it comes from when we were fish, you know, if you believe in stuff like evolution. And the idea of the fellow who wrote the book was that he was studying, he was a doctor, and he was trying to learn the neuropaths of the brain. And he was in a room where somebody had been working on taking an electrical system and changing it around, and he saw all these wires that are just hanging down. It's a big mess of electrical stuff. And he realized that that's what he was trying to learn about in the brain, this messy stuff, you know, that comes from all kinds of different places, different developments along the path to going from fish to person. I think Caroline went into that set of pathways. She didn't leave a clear trail of breadcrumbs to get back to where you started from. So as you worked your way through her show, you kept on getting more and more elements that didn't create a clear picture. They tended to go in very different pathways and give you different sensations. Again, this kind of thing, this lack of repetition, this constant invention, in the world, art world of 50 years ago, would have been seen as somehow yielding to some kind of chaotic element. But so much of the work that came out of that period, when you think about it, had its own. I mean, they're celebrating John Cage now up at National Academy of Design. They're doing a set of concerts. I mean, the guy studied did his work, knew what he was doing, but he wound up with a very chaotic kind of format. And I think part of what Caroline did in that synagogue, which had its own strange space to it, was to exploit that sense of environment as a kind of inner world in which one thing doesn't follow from another. She's not leading you down a path, but she's spreading out and going places. And if you want to follow, you can follow. But if you don't want to, maybe that's okay too. For a lot of artists I can think of, this would be anathema. They want a certain message to get across. I don't think she's looking to do that. She's putting the onus on the person who comes in to find what they want to see. She's offering them a lot of different things to see. Okay. I think there are an awful lot of people who have stumbled onto some of what Caroline is doing, but I don't know if they're as familiar with that way of doing things or if they're as accepting. Particularly in the case of art dealers, I think she's going to have difficulty putting something out that they're used to dealing with. And to me, it's a compliment, because it means that she is engaging in something that's new and something that's challenging. And for all the lip service that these two qualities are given, I see very little of it in the New York art world, and it's even less in the shaking and moving that's engaged in by various art dealers. I think the dealer has he has a responsibility to sell the work and to keep the enterprise going. And there's nothing ignoble about it. But a lot of times, maybe, things that are less easy to explain get short shrift. And I think Caroline could wind up with that kind of situation happening more than once, until she finds somebody who's willing to look at what she does and to deal with it in terms of, this is something that we haven't seen before. And there's a very good reason why, because it's coming out of her head. She's not a trained artist in the sense of having gone through the paperwork of the universities, nor is she trained in the trade kind of thing of learning how to do this, that, and the other thing in commercial establishments. She's picked up her skills, developed them herself, and the only teacher I'm aware that she's worked with is a highly, we would say, conservative man named Nelson Shanks, who I think is one of the best realist portraitists around now or from before. I think he's a beautiful artist. But he certainly isn't teaching what Caroline winds up showing. She's no copyist from anybody, including herself. She's moving from one thing to another rather than trying to present a substantial, repetitive body of work from which the dealer can pick and choose and essentially keep selling the same painting or whatever over and over again. We used to say when people showed that everybody always wants to buy the same painting. So you keep it as close together as possible so that everybody gets one, sort of like lemmings. I don't think they would have a hell of a time with Caroline. I think the most interesting thing that's happened to the New York art world is that we've had a tremendous influx of people from all over the world, and we're much more aware of art in China, places like that, than we ever were before. I think Caroline is part of that movement, and I think it's long overdue. This has always been a very provincial country artistically, even if it's produced some superb painters and sculptors. There's always a sense in this country that there's a little something suspect about indulging the senses. We just had an Army four-star general resign because he had an affair with some subordinate. Now he's he was director of the CIA, so I guess he was in a hush-hush situation and he had to go. But, you know, there's something about the whole thing. You think of all those years of working so hard, and he takes one misstep, and all of a sudden he's out. There's very little forgiveness, very little indulgence in this culture. And I've seen that for years in the art world, among artists, among dealers. And Caroline brings something here with her, which is a part of the Mediterranean, part of a sense of pleasure in things. And it seems odd to be talking about that in terms of art. I mean, what could be more pleasurable than what art does for your eyes? But, you know, I would think of what she does for other people's eyes, what she allows to be shared, and how little of that has been, over the years that I've seen, has actually been done by other artists, particularly American artists. There seems to be an idea. I mean, I had my own art school, so I can say that it was always about the money. Anytime we had a board meeting, it always came down to money. And I think when you look at Caroline's work, there's a sense of sharing. It's not about who buys it, puts it in a box. They've got some place now to store the very expensive multi-million-dollar paintings, some sort of artistic Fort Knox, where these trust fund people or hedge fund people, they take these things that they spend a tremendous amount of money for, and they lock them up where nobody can see them, you know, like a big bank vault. I think Caroline's way of dealing with painting and sculpture and design is as far away from that model as you can get. Whatever there is to see is out there to be seen. She doesn't have to lock anything up. I don't think it would occur to her to lock anything up. It's work that's meant to be shared, enjoyed. And that, I think, is something that she brings here that's needed, that's been lacking. I wonder if other people can understand it, though, because I don't think they've seen all that much of it.